60% of companies that are hacked go out of business within 6 months.
Oh my God.
You're listening to the One Man Business Podcast, brought to you by Rod Pensine. Everything you need to know to run your own show.
Welcome to One Man Business Podcast. My name is Rod Pensine. The topic today is cybersecurity, and I have Omer Segoly here with me. Thanks, man. Thanks so much for coming.
Thank you for having me. What a pleasure.
So to start, I just want you to give an overview of cybersecurity, and I actually asked you a couple weeks ago the difference between antivirus and cybersecurity package, right? And actually, is even me, like we're confused about that. It's so new every day, like so many new threats, and so just an overview on cybersecurity at this age. It's crazy times, right? So if you could share some thoughts on that.
Sure. Yeah. So I founded the company I run is called Tectone. I founded it about 6 years ago. Started with just myself. Today, there's more than a handful of us in the company, mostly technical individuals, and our focus really is cybersecurity. We do offer a lot of IT services as well, but we are a cybersecurity focused IT shop, and I really do believe that every IT company out there should have that mindset. Your kind of audience and the people that you're exposed to, they're very passionate about their business. They love to do what they do. Some of them even quit their day jobs to be able to run this entrepreneurial dream that they've had. Yeah. And now it's just another thing you have to worry about, cybersecurity, because hackers out there, they don't care. They have no emotions. They're just the way their sort of mindset is, if I manage to get into this company and steal money from them or cause them damage, well then they're stupid and they deserve it. That's the kind of mindset of the bad guys that we're dealing with today, and it's really unfair. It's at the same time governments is coming down and with very strict policies. We saw it in Europe with the GDPR.
Oh my God, yeah.
Everybody's heard about that. You've received probably millions of emails from service providers saying we've updated our privacy policy. Click here to review it. We're not compliant with GDPR and so on. And really what that's about is to protect the consumers, because for many years consumers have had it. They've had the short end of the stick. No
voice, right?
No voice. Nobody's looking after you. You're. Let's put ourselves in the shoes of the consumer for a second, not the business owner. Like, you were signing up for Facebook and millions of other services, just out of necessity. Like, you have to do it nowadays. And a lot of those companies, let's talk about, there's a good example actually. So IoT, or Internet of Things, is a big thing now. We have like the smart homes and smart cameras, smart freaking everything. And a lot of those devices are actually getting hacked, and there's a lot of security research that approach those device manufacturers and tell them in advance.
My fridge hacked me.
Can you imagine? And so there's a lot of researchers that are actually proving again and again that there is a lot of backdoors, a lot of vulnerabilities. In fact, when 5 minutes after you plug in one of those smart home devices into your home, it's proven that on average 5 minutes is what it takes for a hacker to try and already attempt to get into the device. Sometimes public companies or even non-public companies, they're trying to maximize their profits and the profits of their shareholders, just like you and me, right? So they're not going out of their way to do the due diligence, to get penetration testers to come in and try and hack their devices, kind of ethical hackers, to try and really discover those in advance before those devices go into the market. They're not doing the legwork, and a lot of the work, due diligence, is not being done, and because of that, they end up getting compromised quite often, and the consumer gets the short end of the stick, and then before you know it, your private information, or sometimes even very, very sensitive information, can leak and get into horrible places, and it's unfair. So that's why Europe came up with GDPR. The US,
Canada has one.
Canada has a very similar one, but we're getting we're also getting very strict here in Canada. There's the privacy commissioner officer that you have to report to when there is a breach.
US is pretty loose, right? It's pretty.
They're actually getting.
They're getting better.
Yeah, like it's more on a state to state basis in the US. Like, California is very ahead of the curve. HIPAA compliance, which a lot of companies, depending on what industry you operate in, you have to abide by. So that's actually quite strict as well, and it's good. Like they're closing the gap.
So that's the context is you have devices, you have Internet of Things, like whatever, like smart home, you have your computer, you have your email, you have your phone. You are actually exposed.
You're very exposed.
In everything.
Yeah.
So, fuck it, let's go to an island and let's forget about this, man.
Yeah.
Like it's
sometimes I kind of want to go back to the flip phone. You know, it's getting out of hands. It's absolutely absurd what's happening, and you know, again kind of going back to what I said in the beginning. Like it's not fair. It's just getting too difficult almost and too risky to run a business. And it's just so much you have to worry about. Before it was like insurance and you know, paying your bills, payroll, and so on. And now it's like cybersecurity, and nobody knows anything about it. And going back to your question earlier about antivirus, it's a funny one actually. It's well in a scary way. We work with a lot of small businesses. Actually, our specialty really is we work a lot with small to mid-sized businesses, and anywhere from one person on staff. We do work with a lot of entrepreneurs, and what I find, even with the larger businesses and operations, everybody has some sort of antivirus usually. Sometimes I see that they don't, but the reality is that today an antivirus solution is really not going to cut it.
Yeah.
It's just
Can
not
you
gonna
go in deep on that, because I'm super curious. I used to have an antivirus, and actually what I did, I just switched to more like a complex package with your guidance. Yeah, and why like antivirus? Man, I don't understand. It's like it's like diets that actually make you fat, right?
So antiviruses are they're okay. Like they're necessary. I'm not going to say that they're not essential, but there's a lot of free antivirus solutions out there that entrepreneurs and small businesses tend to go with, and they're proven that they're not very effective. In fact, sometimes they can do more damage than good. People will have antivirus solutions on their computers, and for example, if you run an office with like 5 employees, what we find a lot of times is that one of the employees can actually get hit with some sort of malware, and they get that pop up on the screen, and gets quarantined, and that's great. But they never actually come forward and tell the employer or their boss what happened. So they kind of sweep it under the carpet. This could have ended up really badly. So let's find out exactly what happened here. Let's make sure it never happens again, and learn from our mistakes. And so a lot of times that doesn't happen because those type of organizations, small businesses, they don't have like a centralized antivirus solution that like alerts the administrator that something went down, and then the administrator can go in and kind of see exactly what happened, why it happened, and how do we make sure it never happens again.
Yeah, and let's be honest, right? For those companies, a free antivirus is just like a step in the funnel, right? They want to upsell you a premium package.
Sure.
That's the truth, right?
Yeah.
So
there's no more free lunches.
It's not. It's not like they care about you. I mean, maybe they have some like pillars in their brand that we do. But yeah, this is so true.
They got to get paid somehow.
Yeah.
Right? And we're talking, they tend to be large corporations, those antivirus makers, and they got to get the money somehow. So they'll kind of give you maybe 80% security and try to lure you into subscribing to their full-on suite. But even so, even the ones that are paid for, I find that a lot of times once we bring in our solution and start scanning devices and computers, we realize that there's actually a lot of horrible things that were running on a computer behind the scenes that those type of applications weren't even able to.
It's not a virus, but it's running and getting your data.
It could be a virus too. It could be like spyware. It could be many different things.
Yeah.
But kind of taking a step back. So where I was getting with this is today it's not just really about your computer anymore. Antiviruses, like I said, most people have them, and that's great. Could be better sometimes, but today it's far beyond the computer. We need to talk about mobile devices. We need to talk about cloud services.
Oh my God.
There's so much sensitive information out there on the mobile and cloud services that we use from day to day, almost more sensitive than our actual computers.
And for example, I use a Google Suite, and they're pretty good. I used to use Office 365 as well. I know you work with both of them, and weren't they supposed to take care of this for you? Like, because I have the feeling that, man, you were paying Google, you were Google, like you were multi-billion dollars company. Take care of security for me, right?
Yeah.
But that's not the truth.
It's a misconception. Unfortunately, nobody reads the terms of services. We just hit agree when we sign up.
I don't want to hear it.
But there's, if you take the time to read and go through it, there's a concept that's called shared responsibility. So Google is responsible, and Microsoft is responsible, and all those other vendors, Dropbox and so on. They're responsible for certain things. They're responsible, for example, to make sure that their servers don't go down. They're responsible to make sure that random people don't walk into their data centers and yank out hard drives and take off. That is their responsibility. But if you are hacked, if one of your accounts is breached, for example, your Google account, that's your responsibility. And if it was to happen to you, and I'm sure it wouldn't, but if it were to happen to you and you were to approach Google about it and say, okay, so this went down, I'm paying you every month, can you explain it? Can you help me make sure that this never happens again? They'll tell you, they may not even answer, but they'll tell you that that is your responsibility. And if you read terms of services that you agree to on this date, you would realize that this one falls in your lap and on your IT.
That's why it's scary. Like, no, this topic is really scary. It's like a house. Your business is a house, and there's a lot of doors. And the feeling I have is like, you help us to understand how many doors I have in my business and to lock all of them.
Yes.
Right. So that's the feeling. That's how I feel. And I was okay. So my house is protected. But the problem today that we have doors and we have like little windows and we have like our phones and we have like, if you were telling me like about you go to a free Wi-Fi or wherever you're there, and then like something pops up. You have to connect your Wi-Fi wherever, and then you click because it looks really professional. I don't know, like
we're seeing that a lot actually. So it's sort of called man in the middle attack is the technical name for it, and what we're seeing is that wireless connections are now getting spoofed. So there's two issues actually. One is you can go into a Starbucks network or your favorite coffee shop, and you connect to even the real network, the real wireless network that's available there. Because there's so little protection in those type of places, if a hacker is connected at the same time and they know what they're doing, they can actually intercept all the data that goes through the network. So if you're doing banking, if you're logging into sensitive healthcare websites, whatever it is, your passwords can actually be intercepted.
Oh my god!
And the same thing we see in airports. This is actually quite scary. A lot of conferences, we're starting to see that as well, and just pretty much anywhere you go, you rely on hotspots and open Wi-Fi's, and so hackers they're not stupid. We're dealing with smart people, and they're getting more and more sophisticated by the day. And so what they do is, if they know there's a conference going on tomorrow, they can actually go there and bring their own wireless device. It's called a Pineapple device. It's very easy to, and anybody can buy it. Just Google it, Pineapple, and you can buy it and essentially spoof that conference wireless SSID, and you can name it anywhere, anything you like, and you can set it up so that, just like you said earlier, once you connect to it, it kind of gives it a pop up. It looks legit. Yeah. It acts and behaves and looks exactly like the real connection, and so it's very easy to fall for it. And once you're in, these guys can intercept all your data, and we're seeing that a lot. So it's really dangerous space, and I always recommend people not to rely on hotspots and public Wi-Fi's especially when dealing with sensitive information. I never do. Sometimes you have to. I mean, we all have hotspots on our phones, so try to utilize that as much as you can. We have a lot of our clients have VPN capabilities that we set up for them so that they can actually we allow them to connect into those Wi-Fi's, but then they have to turn on what's called VPN, and that essentially encrypts your connection and creates this what's called like a virtual private network.
That's cool. That.
So it shields you and guards you against anybody that's trying to intercept your data.
So I think every phone, if you go to the settings, so there's a personal hotspot, right? You just need to turn it on. So this is safe because it's coming from your phone. You're sure that's not
exactly. Yeah, that's as safe as it will get for you, for sure.
And no, dumb question, but how come they cannot yet maybe hack my phone? Like
They can.
the signal from my phone to the tower, let's say. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So we actually see. So I mean, and nobody's really like this. This is possible, and we see this happening. But it's more when there's a very serious target that hackers are after, because it takes a bit more work. So they're not necessarily going to do this for the average Joe. But we do see this from time to time as well, where you can actually spoof like an actual telecommunication antenna.
Oh my god!
And so you can
look like a movie, man. It's like
and this stuff
sci-fi movie.
it's available out there. Like anybody can buy it, and I mean you have to know a little bit what you're doing, but and it takes some work to set it up. But we are seeing this, and so mobile is big. And again, going back to what I said, there's more sensitive data on your mobile than pretty much on any device that you own. And we take our phones. There's a lot of the phones today also have that automatic. Public Wi-Fi connection feature where it just connects you.
Connects automatically, yeah.
Automatically, and I recommend people to turn that off.
So that's great. Recommendations. Can we go for a list?
Yeah.
Let's go through the list. Like I said, let's make sure you are listening to this podcast. You probably have a lot of windows open and doors unlocked. So to help those guys, can you give like an overview? Of course, we don't want to give full detail. Blah, blah, blah. There's so many different contexts, but let's say a basic and common house for a solopreneur. What are the windows and the doors that it will lock? And can you
Sure.
list some?
Yeah, I'll give you. That's a great idea, and I'd like to give 3, 4, 5 different options and tools and tips of things that you can actually easily implement. Any entrepreneur, any solopreneur, any business owner, small or big, should have this in the back of their mind, and you can implement these fairly easily. So one, and you just touched that one, is all these back doors, and I like to call it exposure. So it's like, how exposed are you and for what reason? So if you take a look at your phone right now and kind of swipe through your apps, think to yourself, are all these apps really necessary? Do I really need to have all these apps? And what I recommend that you do is...
I'm doing this right now. 1 page, second page,
there's like
third page,
hundreds of apps.
Fourth.
And sometimes we even let our kids and
folders. Like there's 1 page only with folders.
Exactly. And so what you have to realize is that every single one of these apps is a potential vulnerability into your sensitive data.
But how can I tell? I mean, it's...
So hackers today, they're trying to get into as many devices and hack as many people and companies as they can without having to do all the legwork. So yes, they can probably target yourself, Rod, for example, and myself, and many people out there one by one. It will take them a long time. They want to get the most bang for their buck, obviously. So what they do, instead of going one by one, is they do what's called a supply chain attack. And we're starting to see that a lot more, where instead of actually hacking individual people and devices, they'll actually hack the developers of the apps that hundreds or sometimes even millions of people use. And by doing so, as soon as you're in, you can essentially infiltrate, sometimes millions of different devices or companies. And so imagine, for example, if somebody hacked Dropbox. And it sounds like an extreme example, but we're seeing this a lot. I mean, there's so many people, so many companies, so many individuals that rely on Dropbox. And if they were to inject one line of code into their app source code, and the next update it gets released, all of a sudden, millions of people have malicious apps on their phones, and they don't even know it, because it's not like they downloaded it yesterday. This is something that's been on their phone for months, sometimes years, and so you don't really suspect an app like Dropbox. I'll give you actually a classic example. Just to step back from the mobile phone for just a second, Asus. Everybody knows Asus, computer manufacturer, very big, definitely probably top 5 PC manufacturers in the world. They were hacked. And so what these attackers did is they actually got into their software update mechanism that gets pushed into all the Asus computers out there in the world, and they were able to inject their own malicious line of code into that update mechanism. And the next time a software update went out to all Asus computers, all of a sudden all these Asus computers
you're updating a virus.
Yeah, and
you have a new update. It's
Yeah,
a
and you don't know
big
about it,
new
right?
virus.
And that's why, again, I'm kind of going back to that GDPR and those policies that governments are implementing. In a way, it's good because consumers are looked after, because it is really the responsibility of those developers, the Asuses, the Dropbox, and even the small developers for apps to really make sure that this never happens, because it can cause a lot of damage. So try and reduce your exposure, or the technical term for it is attack surface. Try and reduce it as much as you can. Try to minimize your exposure by just
Clean up a little bit.
eliminate all the apps that you don't need, all those games that you downloaded that you think maybe one day, I'm going to be bored and I'd like to play with it. Get rid of it, and when you need it, you can install it and then uninstall it. If you have like Waze on your phone because you use that when you travel to Brazil, get rid of it. And when you need it, you can download it.
Download again, yeah.
And this applies to your computer and to every cloud service that you use or have used in the past. Eliminate anything you can and anything you don't need, because each one of these apps and services is increasing your exposure to vulnerability and to risks. And all it takes is for one of those apps to get hacked for you to go down, and for all your customers to go down with you, and your entire privacy and your entire digital life. So I recommend my recommendation is to really take some time and go through your phone, go through your computer, and just wipe anything you don't need.
And I'll say that phone is the front door. Sometimes I think I have a feeling that I use more my phone than my computer.
Sure, I do.
And it's funny because I'm a web designer. That's so cool.
I think that's fair to say for the average person today. We probably use our phones more than our computers, and that trend will continue to grow as time goes by. And yes, it's hackers are aware of that, and we talked about 95% of people have antivirus, of some sort of antivirus or security on their computer. At the same time, 95% of people that I talk to, or even more, don't have any kind of security on their mobile device.
Wait. What is the percentage of people?
I will say easily 95%.
Oh my god! Phone, apps.
So
another
exposure,
door.
Yeah, so exposure and just to summarize that, so reduce your exposure and just eliminate anything you don't need. And another one is passwords. The next one I'd like to talk about is passwords. We have hundreds of different accounts that we need to maintain passwords for, and unfortunately a lot of people reuse the same password again and again. And what happens is if one of those accounts gets breach, which almost every day we hear of another company, even big companies getting hacked. So all it takes is for one of those companies to get breached. A lot of times what the hackers are going for is the user information. Sometimes it can be very sensitive. Other times it can be just usernames and passwords and very basic information. But what they do is they take those usernames and passwords and they try and use those credentials, the logins that they find there, against many other services that you could be using. So if you're using the same password in all those services, you're going to go down pretty quickly.
In your bank account or something.
Yeah. So
I use Dashlane, and I'm really happy with Dashlane. It's a good structure, but I know I also use I have another one, a free account for LastPass. I think that's the one you recommend, right? LastPass, Dashlane.
It doesn't matter which one you use. Just use something.
Yeah.
I mean, don't use a built-in like Chrome password manager or the Apple password manager. I don't recommend those. But Dashlane is great. LastPass is great. 1Password. There's a few other ones out there. Most of our clients have one of those. I would say it's one of the first things I like to implement with companies we work with. The goal, the idea, and really the recommendation is for you to have complex passwords, even as long as 20 characters, and all unique. So you're not reusing the same password anywhere. So every service you have, or every service you sign up for, you use a very complex password, a combination of lowercase, uppercase, numbers and symbols, and you try to go for even as long as 20 characters if you can, and make sure it's a unique password that you're not reusing anywhere else.
That's a good recommendation.
And it's what you find also. I mean, it sounds like a pain in the butt to like go and start changing all your passwords or not. But what you find once you implement these solutions is that it actually makes you more efficient.
Yeah, it just makes your life safer. It's faster and okay. So, exposure, password manager. What else?
Two-factor authentication.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah.
I like to talk about that multi-factor authentication or two-factor authentication. You gotta have that turned on every service that you use.
You just make it harder for them because then you need your phone. So like for those that don't understand multi-factor authentication, just like when you log in, it's just like send a text message to your phone or use another app like a Google Authenticator or something else to kind of authenticate the login. Is that right?
Exactly. Yeah. So like you have your oftentimes you log in with your email and then you have your password. Ideally, it's a complex password. Once again, one that you haven't used anywhere else, and you punch that in. You press connect or sign in, and then you get asked for a 6-digit code. There's multiple ways to go about it. Some will sign up for the kind of SMS option where it sends you a 6-digit code by SMS. That one is actually not the safest option. What I recommend to use is an app authenticator. There's one called, for example, Google Authenticator. There's one called Microsoft Authenticator. There's a few other ones out there as well. And it's really, really easy to set up. And so what it does is you put in your email, you put in your password, and then you press sign in, and then you open up that app, let's say Google Authenticator, and you have a list of all the services that you have two-factor authentication set up for, and then that 6-digit code will change every 30 seconds or 60 seconds. So you quickly take that 6-digit code, you punch it in, and boom, you get in. And so this just allows, it gives you more peace of mind and another layer of security to make sure that even if somebody manages to somehow, maybe because they intercepted your data at a wireless connection that you're using, or they somehow manage to find the password that you use for that service, even if they have it, they still can't get into your account because they physically need access to your phone. They need to physically have your phone.
That's a good one. Actually, you were talking, and I was scanning my brain, like my emails. I have like some email accounts, and I don't think I have in all of them. So that's the thing. You have to, if you're talking about security, you have to close and lock all the doors, right?
Exactly.
So okay.
I almost treat an account that doesn't have two-factor authentication as a compromised account. Because you just don't know, and a lot of times those accounts are not being monitored. So like if somebody went in and out through the door a few times, you probably don't even know about it.
It's a good point.
And so again, kind of like with the apps that we talked about, sit down, go through the services that you use. Start with the ones that are most critical, because I mean there are hundreds of different services that you sign up for. Some of them are they really don't hold much information, so don't focus on those. Start with the key ones. This also applies to what we talked about with passwords, so the kind of password management conversations. Like start with the key accounts, the main services where really you have the gold mines, like the ones that you really can't afford anybody to get into. Start with those, and it might be 5-10 different accounts. Make sure you have very strong passwords, and make sure that you also have two-factor authentication set up for those. So go through your banking, your Gmail, your Office 365 accounts. Anything that really has sensitive information should have two-factor authentication enabled. Unfortunately, however, we find that it's not always the case, and it's not always available as an option. And I have told clients in the past that I recommend for them to move away from that company because they don't have certain security features. And one of the things I like to look for first is does the service provider provide two-factor authentication as an option? And if they don't, in 2019,
it's a big statement if they don't.
Exactly. You can rest assured that they're not really looking after your best interests, and there's a few other things behind the scenes that they probably should be doing that they're not doing.
Wow, that's a good point. I never thought about that. So okay, that's 3 big ones. Great.
So I will just close off with one very significant recommendation that should be on your radar. So phishing or email attacks is we find that most companies that are hacked usually is via email. Like that for a hacker to try and get into your accounts or your company, their kind of first choice and first step would be to try and infiltrate via email.
To get an email from a provider looks really legit. They're really good on this. So what happened when you click?
So a few things can happen, and just like you said, like you tend to get that from the kind of the big providers, the telecommunication companies, Rogers, Fido, and so on, but also banks. We see that a lot with banks.
Banks, yeah.
And I mean, there are really a handful of large banks that Canadians use, for example. So if you're a hacker and you blasted out a fake like BMO email to hundreds of thousands of different email addresses that are associated with Canadians, most likely some of them are BMO clients, and so you get this email. It looks like, let's pick on BMO. So it looks like BMO. The logo is there. The wording oftentimes can be quite legitimate, and it looks very professional, and they can mimic exact communications that BMO actually sends out. And then there's usually a call to action. It can say something like, for example, there was suspicious activity in your account. Please click here to review. And if it's your bank, and you hear that there's suspicious activity, a lot of times you would actually click on that button to see what the hell is going on. I need to find out more. And unfortunately, what happens next is quite scary. So you'll appreciate it as a web designer. So you land on a BMO looking web page. It looks entirely like the BMO landing page. I mean, these guys really go out of the way and they put a lot of effort into it. And so you get on this landing page and okay, so a lot of times they'll also even take you straight to the kind of login page off the BMO website. And so right away you don't think twice. You just go and you got that email. You're obviously a BMO customer, so it's got to be legit. So you go ahead and you put your email, and then you put your password, and you press connect, and you just handed the keys to the castle.
That's really. Do we have a multi-factor authentication in banks?
You better hope so. So banks are catching up. I mean, I'm actually embarrassed for them that they're just now starting to implement those type of measures. The banking is probably one of the first places you should go to enable that.
Wow.
And banks. They are weak. A lot of them only offer like the SMS option, for example, which I said is not as secure as the actual app authentication that you can get for two-factor. But have something. Really, you gotta make sure you got something turned on. And but going back to phishing. So this is kind of one form of phishing. So you ask kind of what happens next. So a lot of times they do it to kind of steal your credentials, and a lot of it is automated. So they're not going after you and I. They're going after everybody. They're just blasting this out to the world, hoping that somebody would open one of those emails and follow through with the call to action. And so what happens next? Like right away, your account can get cleared out. There's a crazy, scary stat that I saw a few years ago, and I can't stop thinking about it. And that's part of the reason actually why I do what I do and help small businesses and entrepreneurs. 60% of companies that are hacked go out of business within 6 months.
Oh my God! More than a half of the companies get hacked.
Firewalls, also like something that's been around since like the late 80s, early 90s. Firewalls today, like that's one thing I didn't touch, and maybe leave that for another episode, but it's super important for your company to also have a really, really good firewall in place. There's options out there that are available for small businesses as well. They can be as affordable as $1,000, $1,500, and which seems expensive, but again, it's think about the price you pay for having a breach. And so if you have a really good firewall, a lot of times they have VPN capabilities built in, and so what it allows you to do is essentially go into that coffee shop and then kind of VPN and create a connection between where you are in the world to your office, and so it sort of connects you right into your office network where you have control and you're secure. And so that's one way to go about setting this up.
That's awesome. Oh my God, that's so much information, and I'll probably have to listen to this podcast again and again just to make sure that I understand everything, because I want to help my clients as well, and I want to educate them on this, because this is, like I said, half of the business that get breached, they can go out of business. So I don't want this to happen to your passion, to your dream, to whatever you were building. Wow, I think that's it. Just to wrap up, I wanna share that I use your service. I like to bring people that I really trust to the podcast. So usually people that I already work with, and I have a package that I think is really affordable for solopreneurs. It's like protecting my phone, my computer, and my cloud. That's my business, basically, right? That's my house. That's most of the windows and doors that I have. So I think it's really affordable. I want you to just talk a little bit about that, and if you have any other thing to wrap up,
Yeah, for sure. So you can actually read more about it or check out our website, techtone.ca/cybersecurity to read more about this package that Rod is describing. So going back to everything we've talked about today, really what I'm trying to make clear is that like there's no point of doing 25% security or just having an antivirus on your computer today. You might as well not do anything because you're so exposed in other areas, those other doors and windows. And so what we've done is we put together and handpicked the absolute best cybersecurity products out there, and we package them in a way that is very affordable for any small businesses, even a one-man operation. So it gives you the same kind of level of security, sometimes even better security than the big and large corporations actually have. And so we price it at $360 for the entire year, so less than $1 a day. It gives you security and the absolute best security you can have for your computer, your mobile device, and your cloud accounts.
And this is a 2019 price. If you're hearing this podcast in the future, or when the robots took over the earth, whatever, the price can change, and
Canadian dollars as well, by the way.
Yeah. Which is better for.
So if you're a sole entrepreneur, I mean that's $360. You get the absolute best security you can have, and we look after you. So you get the actual software licensing, but we also do monitoring as well. So we monitor it around the clock for the entire year, and if there's ever any issues that we find in one of your devices, or if you have multiple employees, it's $360 per employee, and so we monitor the entire company. And so if one of your employees gets hit, the main contact will be approached right away, immediately, and we obviously would quarantine that malware right away, but we would also get in touch with you to make sure that you're aware
the
of this.
network is safe.
They know kind of exactly what happened, and sometimes we want to like scan it even further, and so. It's not just the actual software that you're paying for. It's actually it's more so the monitoring and having my team behind the scenes take care of you and your team.
That's amazing, man. Thank you so much. Like, I think this is a public service for sure. And if you want to know more about Omer and his company, techtone.ca is the website. Thank you so much for joining me in this podcast, Omer, and I hope we can, we help save lives out there with this podcast. And thanks again for coming, man.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Cheers, man. Awesome.